Welcome to my garden studio. Yay! Today what I would like to do is demonstrate a simple way of doing a poppy, a poppy flower. And we're going to do one big flower pretty much on the third line again, and let's go through some of the principles. What I'm doing is I'm using a palette knife, using a little bit of black and all the reds, oranges and reds, so crimson and cadmium red and cadmium orange. The first thing I want to do is edge the painting with a piece of laminated paper. And these are wonderful things. This material is a wonderful way of creating just an advert, and it's laminated with plastic, perfect for picking up the paint when you're using a palette knife, something flat, rather than a palette in its traditional way. I've used the back of my palette, I use the front of my palette. Sometimes a little bit tough to pick up the paint, because you really are looking at this edge of the palette knife and manipulating it. So I want it to be an easy exercise in creating a poppy. You've got your red. You've got to be careful of red and white, because it can be pink, and poppies are pink, they are orange, they're yellow, they're red, they're all sorts of colors, even purple poppies. But one big flower bloom that happens roughly in the middle, roughly on the third line, which is about there, going to be about there, maybe slightly off center, to create interest. So we very easily create a circle, thinking about the poppy shape. So what we're doing is we're going to go right out of the frame, out of the border, and then I'm going to look at this border, and we're gonna let's put a piece in here. Opposite to red is green, so I'm going to be doing green on the side, not as if it's grass or anything, and then I'm going to be darkening this area here. So let's get some red out and start with this is acrylic paint. I'm going to squirt out a bit of a blob there, close that up, and let's just see what happens. It's going to be slightly abstract. I don't want it to be super realistic, and I'm getting that much paint on my palette knife. So what we're going to do, I'm going to go in an arc like this, and let's just start. And the nice part about a rough board is that you're going to get this kind of pausing of the paint as it goes around. So let's just curve this. Let's go in the same direction, pick up some more paint. Let's go in the same direction, which is a little bit of a twist around, and these little veins that happen with the board being rough like it is. The board is painted roughly. So let's go there, and we do it again, and you're going to have a little bit of a black mark happening in the middle of the poppy. So there's my basic shape. I'm just a bit hesitant to go this way around, but let's see what happens. And we cover the whole area, And now I want to get this to dry. Red is a very curious color. It's the one color that gets eaten by UV light. Really strangely, the UV light actually munches up the red. So there we go. That's good, looking cool. Just get some edge there. And this, it doesn't have to happen fast. It just needs to be a little bit more deliberate. So I've got, there's my basic shape of the flower, the poppy. I'm going to change this shape down the bottom here to give myself a little bit of a dimension to this flower. So there we go, something like that. A palette knife is a very interesting thing because you have to be sensitive. It's more like sculpting. It's almost sculpting with paint. You're creating a three-dimensional aspect to it. So touching it very lightly or pushing very hard. If I push really hard, it's going to create these marks. So you've got to be sensitive to the pressure that you're putting on the palette knife. But there's a very good starting point to the poppy, and I'm using a reference from Google, which is copyright free. So and this is my own interpretation of the poppy itself. The next part of the painting is going to be putting a strong line in here, and what I'm doing is I'm twisting my brush. I'm picking up some black, super black, and I'm just putting a line in here, and I'm twisting my brush to get it down to the bottom. What I'll be doing once this is dry, I'm going to be adding some dark marks roughly here, so that seem to go out in fours. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put a dark mark in here. Remember, we're not doing a realistic poppy. We're doing an abstraction of a poppy. So I'm gonna just put that in there and then let it dry. Let this whole painting dry, and then we take it from there, take it to the next level. See what happens. I'm going to just twist my paintbrush a little bit like that, to give myself the dimensions of the poppy's lines. Okay, we've turned a 4 mark into a 5 mark, which is fine. And then we just leave that to dry. So now what I've done is I've mixed up some orange, because I don't like using red color with white because it goes pink. So now I'm going to just put some orange in here, like that, and like that. Then busy painting up the poppy. It's nice and dry. The red is nice and dry. So what I'm going to do is just wipe my palette knife down, and I'm going to get some white. And right here where the contrast is, I'm going to make white marks. All I'm doing with the poppy now is adding the lightest areas in a kind of a radial fashion with my palette knife. Lightest areas on the darkest areas, so the light and the dark contrast. This is a bit big, so I'm going to just take this off. This is acrylic paint, so we've got a fairly cool day today here in South Africa. The next thing I'm going to do is mix up a blue and a raw sienna. So the raw sienna acts like a yellow, and so the blue and the yellow are going to make a green, sort of a dull green, and I'm going to dot it all around the background and then edge my painting. edge it, and then it's finished. Ultramarine blue and raw sienna. And raw sienna acts as a yellow. So the mixture of these two make a dull green. I'm not going to mix them totally together. I'm going to keep them separate, and I've also got white. So let's just begin and see what happens. Get this dull kind of background color. And I'm thinking of adding white in here to create this contrast. And I'm going to use the brush like darting it around, twisting it over. So what we're going to do is we're going to come back to this video and see the final result. So there we go, put some darker areas and some lighter areas. And then I'm going to edge the whole painting with a black. And then we're going to do another one. So thank you very much for watching this part of the video. I'm going to continue with it off screen, and then we come back to the finished one. This color, raw sienna and ultramarine blue, makes a lovely landscape color, series of tones. So the blue acts like a darker tone, and then the raw sienna acts like a yellow, and you get this neutral brownish green. And I just want to lighten some areas in the background, so I'm just going to use the lid of my white acrylic. I'm just going to lighten it a bit. You must remember that acrylic dries lighter than what you see when you put it on. Acrylic PVA or polyvinyl acetate, it dries lighter, so you just got to be careful. It's not the same as oil. Oil gives you the exact color that you're seeing, and then acrylic goes lighter as it dries, and you just got to bear that in mind, keep it in mind. Okay, so what we're going to do now, I'm going to let that just have a chance to dry. I've cut across here in the composition of it, but really one of those things I have to say again is that it's so easy to do a single object painting, and we're just going to reinforce what we've done here using a palette knife as a sculpting tool. So we've sculpted around and placed the paint on the canvas, and use it as a sculpting tool. Don't use it, try not to use it as a brush. It's not a brush. The brush is a completely different feel. So what we're going to do now is edge the painting with spray paint and get this edge to be darker, and hopefully it's going to pull everything forward and pull it up. So that's really where we're aiming. That's the kind of thing we're looking at. A poppy single object painting, and it really is easier than one thinks. It's a very nice little project of an exercise in using your palette knife as a sculpting tool. I'm going to place a piece of laminated A4 page onto the painting once it's dry. And what I'm going to do now is sand off the edges of all the textures that are happening on the side of the painting, so that when I spray it, it doesn't pick up those texture marks. But it's a terrible sound on video, so I'm just going to not worry about doing it. I'm going to do it off camera. What we're doing is I'm spraying the background of the painting to get a border.
Okay.
That I've got a little visitor who's watching the painting happening, and she loves it. What is your name?
I think
Gogo.
so.
because you go and go and
So
go.
this is
Yes,
it's for painting.
yes, come.
Let me draw
you
my name.
put your hand in there and paint there, and then you see it in the video. Yep, there we go. This is Gogo, my friend, and she loves my painting of the poppy. So what I'm going to do, when it's dry, I'm going to give it to Gogo. So she's got her hand in the painting, and there she goes. The spray is in. I'm using just normal spray from a hardware store. And this is black. I've edged it. And now I'm going to drop the frame in and give you an idea of what the final piece looks like. Single, very simple, using a palette knife or a spatula. You can even use a piece of cardboard or whatever to create the form and the edges of the flower or whatever subject matter, remembering that we've got opposing lines at the bottom to give it some background, and that's the painting. There it is.